Now in this lesson we're going to focus on linear perspective, the idea that everything recedes as it goes back into the distance. So you have linear perspective and atmospheric perspective. An atmospheric perspective is the idea that things get lighter as they recede and smaller due to the atmosphere. You're looking through moisture, dust in the air. It makes the distant mountains look bluer. Trees get lighter, a little grayer in color and bluer in temperature. And that's atmospheric perspective due to the moisture in the air and dust and whatever we happen to be looking through. Linear perspective is the idea that things recede and get smaller as they go back to the background because of a vanishing point. In other words, the lines on a building recede back to a point on the horizon. And if we have some idea of where those points are going to be, we can render a house and make it look square, or a building, or a road, or a sidewalk, and make it look three-dimensional and like it's receding back to the distance. In general, you think of linear perspective, you think of 1, 2, or 3 point perspective, but the idea of perspective in painting is that you want it there, you want knowledge of it, but you don't want it to show up as much. You want the sense of light, the color, the brushwork to be the most important thing. And your knowledge of perspective shouldn't be so obvious. When it becomes so obvious, it looks mechanical or technical, looks like maybe a architectural rendering. And I want my work to look like paint, not an architectural rendering. So I want some knowledge of it without it being too much. Nowadays they have just tons of little books, not very big, and they give a quick artistic overview of linear perspective. And they're very helpful, they're easy to read. You know, it's like learning how to add or subtract. It's just something you know. And the more you practice it, the easier it is to manipulate. But I don't want it to be too obvious. It should be there but not stick out. So again, it's a tool to use to make your painting have some depth, but I don't want to make it so mechanical that it makes my painting look stiff. So this is the image we're going to use. This is a house in Oklahoma City, and we're going to use the linear perspective. You can see the lines on the driveway. They all meet at a point in the distance. The lines in the house on the left side of the house meet at a point on the left side. The lines on the right side of the house meet at a point over on the right side, so on the horizon line. So we'll go over that a little bit. And it's something that you learn, and it should become kind of second nature, not too obvious. But like a lot of things, it takes repetition for it to really sink in. So if I have a horizon line, and I want the horizon line either below the middle point or above the middle point. If I know I want a lot of foreground, if I have roads on hills, that's my kind of center of interest, I'll raise the horizon line up high. But then everything sits on this plane. This is the flat plane that everything sits on. And anything that's rectangular and level and plumb, on a flat surface, it's going to meet at a point on the horizon line. For instance, if I have a house here, let's just do a square first. Not a very accurate square. These lines here and these lines here have to meet at some point on the horizon line. And it doesn't matter where I put it. Wherever I put it will change how steep the line is. So I can look at my reference, or if I'm outside, look at what I'm painting. And if it's a real steep grade, in other words, the roof comes down real steep, or the bottom of the house comes up real steep, I know the vanishing point is somewhere close to the house. The further away I put it, even off the canvas, then it spreads out more. But let's just place it here for the sake of doing it. So now I can draw the line, get it more opaque. Now I'm using the vanishing point, and let's have this one right here. So there's my building. Very simple. This side goes that way, and if I have a sidewalk, on the side of the building. Of course, it's going that way, and sidewalk over here is going that way. Doesn't have to meet. And it'd be the same thing with the doors or windows. If I have doors and windows, the tops of them would also line up with that horizon line, depending on which side of the building. And that's the easy point. It can get harder. It can become more difficult to kind of find where the vanishing point might be. Now, when I'm painting, I'm never trying to place a vanishing point anywhere. I know it's there somewhere, so I'm conscious of it, but I don't stop and make a line across the canvas and try to decide where the point is. If I was doing architectural rendering, I would have to do that, and it'd have to be very, very accurate, but not in painting. This is a painting by Edward Redfield, and you can see here, he's got buildings down here, and they're on a flat plane, and they're rectangular, and they're plumb, they're straight. So they will always have a vanishing point, or they should look like it, on this horizon line. Again, the horizon line is placed here because that's about where the sky and the ground would meet if there was nothing else. So, and this works pretty good. These guys were, a lot of them were illustrators and really knew how to draw. So there's the vanishing point for that house. The bottom of it's down around there somewhere. Same thing with all these. If I drew a straight line, and straight is kind of suspect here, but they would all meet on these vanishing points. They would never, the roofs would never be at an angle where they go above the horizon line or below it. They would always be going right there. Now, when I have something like the road on a hillside, then the vanishing point doesn't have to be on the horizon line because the road is not plumb. It's not necessarily on a flat surface. It's going up and down a hill, so it could be pointing up in the sky, like this first part of the road. These two lines meet right there. So the horizon line for the top part of the road is way above the horizon line. Then this one, and if I just carry the two sides, that's meeting below. Then you might have the road turns and goes this way, and if you carry those lines out, it might meet somewhere over there. So on rolling hills, roads, streets, rows of fences that have a perspective line to it, those vanishing points can be anywhere. But if it's a rectangular object on a flat surface and it's level and plumb, it's always going to have the horizon line on the, or vanishing point on the horizon line. Same thing with like this row of stuff here. If it has a vanishing point, and it looks like it's on the horizon line. Thinking that way makes that row of rocks and shrubbery recede back in the distance. That's why it's important to kind of know that objects that recede back have to have a point where they're going to meet. And things generally get smaller as they recede back. Not always. You can have trees that are bigger in the background and smaller in the foreground. Like there's a tree right here, right there, that's bigger than this tree here, and this tree's in front. But generally, you'll have bigger trees in front and the trees gradually get smaller, and that's the perspective of objects like that. And the more you use that, the more depth you'll have on a flat surface. So I might have a tree in the distance that's bigger than a little tree here, but overall I want most of my trees bigger in the front and smaller in the back, and that gives that sense of perspective on there. A couple of more paintings. That was Edward Redfield, by the way. I'll give a list of artists to look at and figure out where the horizon line is. See if you can map where the lines go from the houses. This is Kenneth Nunemaker, and if you follow his road here, the lines, and again, I'm not trying to be too straight, so right there, and that's where the horizon line is. Same thing with the house here. If I draw a line from the roof, then the line is there, and the bottom is probably somewhere here. Even the windows should be going to the horizon line. So, but then the road changes. The road down here, the horizon line is right in there. Sometimes, most time, the horizon line is off the page, off the canvas, but not always. The road makes a turn. No, it didn't go too straight there. And the horizon line so it has 3 different vanishing points for that road, and none of them are on the horizon line, but the house is, because it's flat and it's level, or it's on a flat surface and it's level. But even fence rows, if I draw a line from the top, a line from the bottom, same way, if they gradually get smaller as they go back, that's going to show depth, and that's what the vanishing point is. So the vanishing point, or the fence rows have a vanishing point, because they're, lined up in a row, and we want to make them look like they're receding back. So they have to get smaller as they go back, and they have to have a vanishing point somewhere, not necessarily on the horizon line, because they aren't always on a level surface. So if that I hope that makes sense, and the more you think about it, the more it starts to make sense. This is a painting by William Wendt, California Impressionist, early 20th century, and you can see the horizon line's real high. And all these houses, and it might run off, the horizon line might run off, but it would eventually meet on the vanishing point, but it would eventually meet on the horizon line, because again, these are squared up buildings, they're plumb, they're on a flat level. Same thing here, these would meet on the horizon line way off the page. And you can see the trees, bigger in front, smaller as they recede. All that works together to give it a good sense of aerial perspective.